That's what they used to call him when he was alive. The oil of the lane.
He was the oil of the lane, so we decided to.
He's a big time bowler. Like, hey, my name's I think Earl, and they call me the oil of the lanes.
Earl Oil of the Lanes Jones.
Roll the intro.
Hello? No, I know. No, don't worry about it. Season 4 starts right now.
Let's go! Welcome back to Under the Influence, the premier Christian influence podcast. I am your host today, Jaret Brown, and I'm here with...
Who goes first?
Levi Thiessen.
And the lead singer of Smash Mouth. Jerry Crane.
I think it looks so good.
Some.
That was really loud.
That was so loud.
So yeah, I'm just going to call it out right at the beginning. One of the last episodes we recorded, you guys knew that I was shaving down, making a little bit of a progression. I've reached peak status of humanity, the soul patch. I am a youth pastor now at our church, and so it was a requirement that I give this a shot at some point. And I want to get it out of the way. I know it's going to be distracting. Many of you are going to have real strong opinions about it. So do I. And my strong opinion isn't that I like it, but I don't hate it. But yeah, I'm just trying it. So you're going to see this for at least one episode.
We may lose some video watchers to audio listeners.
Video listeners. Welcome back, everyone. Thank you, Jaret, for ringing us in. As he said, this is the premier podcast at Christian Influence Ministries. We love you very much. We're so glad that we're here. Jaret, to give you a quick introduction who you are, because people are probably like, what in the world? They replaced one redhead with a new one.
We can replace him.
You can never replace Byron. Unfortunately, Byron, again, couldn't be here with us. He won't be here with us for quite a few episodes. It's just something to probably expect moving forward. Byron is going to be less involved, not because he doesn't want to be, but he's super busy. You all know he's a physical therapy student. His schooling just every year ramps up to the nth degree, and it's disgusting, and we feel bad for him. But yeah, so he won't be as involved, but he'll still be on the show from time to time. But this week, we're so excited to welcome a special guest, Jaret Brown. Both of us have known Jaret for years.
A long time.
Like, since we were infants. No, just kidding. We've known him for a long time. You've heard us talk about working at a ballpark in the past. That's how we met. We'll probably talk about that a little bit. And you know what? I don't think we need to do an opening hypothetical. I think let's just get to the nitty-gritty, the juicy stuff of this episode, which is mainly how we know Jaret and knowing Jaret and about Jaret and all that stuff. So we've known Jaret for, let's think about it, 10 years almost, probably 8 years.
8 years, 2016?
2016, yeah, probably.
Yeah.
And the way we got to know him was working at that ballpark. So my dad, he ran all the food at the Salem Kaiser Volcano Stadium. I helped him do that. Basically, all my classmates in high school at one point or another worked there. And Jaret started working there in the summer of 2015, right? Wouldn't it have been? Because that would have been...
Yeah. No, it was 2015.
Yeah. So he started working then, and we didn't really hit it off right off the bat.
No, me and Jude got
Yeah.
really close right away.
That's true.
That first year, it was very much, you're my boss.
Yeah.
But after that, things changed quickly.
Things changed quickly. Then you were my boss.
Yeah.
No. No, it's an interesting thing. So right off the bat, I was kind of skeptical of you because you and the other. So Jaret joined as a hawker. For those who don't know what a hawker is, a hawker walks up and down through the stadium and they're like, peanuts, Cracker Jacks, cotton candy. Well, I'll let you. You're a pro. Go for it.
No.
Okay. So
He's left that life behind him.
yes, you don't want to relive that.
Nightmare flashbacks every time I hear it.
But he was exceptional. We've had good hawkers in the past. He was really good at it. And so we actually moved him into the beer hawker position pretty quickly. So he was the one doing that with beer. He made, he did a really good job. But the other hawker that you guys were just such jokesters. Mm-hmm. The two of you and I was like, I'm skeptical of this guy right off the bat, but I was wrong. He was great. He did a great job.
I'm a very loud person. So that job really worked out really well for me.
It's a good outlet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I get to yell at people. Okay, I'll do that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. It's like you're like, Cracker Jacks, just yelling at them in the face. And they're like, yeah, I'll take some. Yeah.
Do you want a drink?
Well, and like Tyler, whenever we would pass each other, we would like
Shout
have
out,
like little
Tyler.
arguments, or we would have like like staged arguments.
Well,
to just, like-
Drumming up some drama for the fans, you know.
I see.
and then the tip jars, we'd have 2 different cups with like Star Wars or Harry Potter and like
I don't remember you doing
Oregon
that. That's
ducks
awesome.
and
That's
stuff
wild.
and beavers and
Like each of you would have 2?
Yeah, I think
Nice.
because we were doing that just to kind of like drum up controversy, so that way people get more involved.
But yeah, so that's how we met Jaret. Was there anything about that? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to just like steamroll over I thought you were about to say something earlier.
Oh,
but was there something about that you wanted
I
to
kind
say?
of just stayed away from him because of like the hawker crowd at the time, you know.
And Levi was upstairs, so we didn't get a lot of.
And yeah, there was that
Screen
too.
time.
Because like I get to see basically everyone from every single stand except for the hawkers.
Yeah.
Because I was making things in conversation with needing to know what they needed at what time. But like the hawkers, it was like such a massive barrier as well.
Yeah.
Our group was myself, Tyler, Brandon, Jude. That was like
Yeah. No, that, I mean, because we stationed the hawkers like at the ballpark. There was 13 different primary concession stands. The concession stand that we would station them out of so they could go there and refill their stuff, we purposely put them at the one that's the least busy, right? So that they can go and refill. And that was the kid zone, the area with the playground. And that's where Jude spent a lot of his time. In hindsight, I feel so bad, like poor Jude got stuck there. But honestly, Jude kind of made the most of it because your guys' group, you guys had a ton of fun. And so so he mentioned a guy named Tyler. He was one of our other hawkers, and they went to high school together. And then Brandon, for those that have seen this show, Tim, Nye, Brandon's his older brother, actually. And they just had a lot of fun down there. You know, Jude's got some great stories. I mean, I've seen some hilarious Snapchat memories.
those pop up, and I'm so embarrassed.
Yeah, there's some ridiculous, youthful stupidity, but like lots of rubber band hornet battles and other things.
Tinfoil basketball.
Yeah, they made the most of it. They still worked. They still got the job done. But no, what I would say about us getting to know each other early on. So like you said, that first season, I remember that. Like it really was like I was just your boss.
Mm-hmm.
There wasn't a whole lot of joking around or hanging out. That second season, I just remember being like, man, this guy's great. Why aren't we friends? Like it was super fun to get to know you better. Cause that second summer I was like, okay, Jaret's hilarious. When I kind of isolate him too out of just the whole hawker group, I'm like, oh, we have pretty good conversations too.
Mm-hmm.
Cause like it's hard to have meaningful conversations when that group, I feel like, I'm not saying anything against the people that were hawkers, but that kind of thing, you know how we were just saying everything was funny and fun and that's a great thing, but I never really had meaningful conversations.
Yeah.
But then there was a time where we sat down in the office and I remember being like, oh, that was a really insightful conversation. That was a lot of fun. And then after that, we did like some bowling here and there, and that was fun. That first time where I invited myself bowling.
He did.
I did not.
Yeah.
I did
Tyler
not.
and I were going bowling, and Jerry's like,
You've even admitted since then that I didn't invite myself bowling.
There's no evidence of that whatsoever.
You're right. None on camera.
Tyler and I were going bowling, and he's like, "Oh, what are you guys doing?" Because I think it was a Friday night, and you were asking if we were staying for the fireworks.
Maybe.
And we were like, "Oh no, we're gonna go bowling." And Jerry's like, "Oh, I love bowling."
Dude,
And then it kind of like
even
sat there for a second.
The way you're describing it, that is so not me. Like I am so uncomfortable. I always feel bad if like, oh, I feel like I might have literally last night I went to something with people and felt like, and they had invited us. And I was like, hey, I'm sorry that we kind of invited ourselves. And they're like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
Like, so there's no way I would have done that. Absolutely not.
Jared's just gaslighting Jerry.
If I did,
100%.
maybe I did. Well, I just remember the rest of that summer, you guys referencing it, like and I was like so bothered by
It's
it.
because you were like filled with anxiety about it. So
Yeah.
that's a thing that we have to target because we
Yeah.
were young and
Ouch.
dumb. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
the
when we
wound in
found
my
out
So
side.
your guys' whole relationship started by you like gaslighting the heck out of Jerry and continuing to
We also
do so
found
to
out
this
that
day.
Tyler's bowling ball had his grandfather's ashes in it.
That wasn't true though, was it?
Yeah.
Wait, really?
Oh, really?
Yeah. Yeah. So
That's
every time we got a
wild.
gutter bowl, he was like,
Just threw my grandpa in the gutter. Yikes, dude! I heard him say that. I always, no offense, but like didn't believe him.
No,
it just seemed like something he'd be like, yeah, it's got my grandpa's ashes in it, but like not true.
Yeah, no.
That's a wild resting place for,
the oil of the lanes, dude.
The what?
Oil of the lanes.
I don't get it.
That's his resting place.
Oh, his resting. I missed that. Somebody said,
Yeah.
The oil of the lanes.
Yeah.
I thought you were just making calling that's what they used to call him when he was alive. The oil of the lanes.
He was the oil of the lane, so we decided to.
He's a big time bowler. Like, hey, my name's I think Earl, and they call me the oil of the lanes.
Earl Oil of the Lanes Jones.
Yeah.
We're glad that you're here with us.
You can just call me Lane.
Yeah. No, but Jaret, I would say what marked the beginning of like a friendship between us more than just like, yeah, we are friendly at work and it was fun getting to know each other, was like at the ballpark, we hung out a lot, but there was a point where my friends and I were all playing D&D, and you and I had started talking about D&D, and you're like, man, that sounds really cool. And so you got involved in the D&D group. And I don't know if there's something maybe you want to talk about the beginning of that, but I just think that was where like it went from, okay, you and I are buddies, to where all of a sudden now you and I are good friends, and you are friends with all of the friends I already had as well.
Well, I kind of got
And you
into the
invited
group.
yourself into it.
I invited myself into the group because
Just kidding.
your dad needed help with caterings.
Yeah. Oh, right.
So he kind of did like a trial run with me at the ballpark for the breakfast
That's
caterings. He kind of started slowly inviting me to do more events with him before he started trusting me to do events on my own. I crashed his car the day of the eclipse.
Dude,
I remember that. Dude, that was wild. Because we're all just stressing out, and then all of a sudden we get that phone call and just like.
I've been awake for like.
Back to like the storyline of like our involvement with.
Let's go disc golf.
I remember being at Shemeketa, like walking from my car and having a phone call with Jerry.
Shemeketa.
Like talking. Shemeketa is a community college, but like intensely like talking about like whether or not we should allow you to join D&D.
Yeah.
Because that was
It's a big
like
deal.
It was a big deal
Yeah.
because D&D is something very important to us. We already had a group there, and Jaret was more of an outsider compared to the rest of us.
Yeah.
Like the rest of the
A
group.
real flight risk, you know, if you know what I mean.
And I like into fantasy and stuff like that. I'd never been in like interested in it at that time. Like I'd never seen Lord of the Rings. I'd never watched Harry Potter. Like I wasn't involved with it, but I loved the game Assassin's Creed.
Yeah.
And when you were talking to me about like, hey, is this something you want to try? I remember I think it was you two and Jude set up a one shot for me.
Yeah.
And you
Yeah.
helped me create a character. You're like, you can make an assassin.
Yeah.
And so we did that. And I'm like, that still is the character that like holds my heart.
Yeah.
Like we played
Holds my heart.
I mean, and I played him for like 5 years, you know?
It's like an adorable imagery. Like, holds my heart. This character,
I'm imagining Jericho.
this assassin.
And ironically, like I see a lot of growth in that character.
Oh, yeah.
And kind of mirrored a lot of the growth that I had myself.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Because in the beginning, it was
From
just,
murderer to believer, right?
Yeah. It carried like as my life changed, just like you kind of see it reflect in the character. And that's kind of why I made it so important to be my character in this campaign in Of Lore and Legend, the other podcast on the Christian Influence media. I wanted the two characters I played in our last campaign had such dark backstories. And while it makes cool like backstory and stuff, it's like I just wanted to focus on positivity. I wanted to have just fun without like the darkness or anything to kind of drag it down. So I came up with Titus, and there's nothing dark or scary about him, and he's just a childlike wonder, has fun, plays pranks.
There he is right there, all squished and squashed. Poor little guy.
But I wanted to just have a positive outlook.
Yeah. I love that when we were talking about characters to play in this campaign, and you you're like, here's my idea. I was like, oh, this is great. Because like such a cool opportunity for you to play something that's from the get-go. And there's some mystery and some, what is this and that, about his backstory. But it's not like he's, so the character you played before, his backstory was that he, didn't know his parents. He was raised on the streets. He was brought into a thieves guild, trained as an assassin. He assassinated a royal figure and then got away, and now he's adventuring with this party. It's like he had this dark, like secret backstory. It was really big deal if you were in a certain area, like because you were a criminal. But then we saw this redemption of this guy, learn to love and be loved, and eventually ended up getting married, and found out about like who his parents really were, and all some of those fantasy tropes. But it was a cool story. And then now you're playing this turtle kid that's like. The world's honestly pretty cool, like
I'm 18.
Yes, I'm 18, so I can take part in war games, and I think it's really refreshing. And I recently somebody like in the Discord, I'm sure you saw it, like said like some really nice things about the D&D podcast and what they love about it, and I love what they said about. Actually, I'm going to check real quick.
It warmed my heart reading.
I don't want to misquote it.
Yeah.
But what they said about Titus, I thought was really insightful, or at least like spot on about him. They said, just talking about the show in general, but they were saying, I love the mysterious backgrounds of Edward and Clonus and the comedic value of Titus and Lumen. Because like Titus is just so innocent that like you were all playing, and then all of a sudden, like there's some serious thing going on, and Titus is just like I don't know. I just think it's so funny because you do the Titus voice. Do it.
Hi, I'm Titus.
Like that. If we were in a serious moment and then Titus is like, what if we go over there? It's just like so funny.
Yeah. It's like super intense. And I'm like, so do we plan on killing them or?
Yeah. I think it's so funny.
Like somebody like has like a big old like, you don't do this or else I'm going to like destroy you and everything around you. And then you're just like, don't play pranks on him. Don't play pranks on him. Don't play pranks on him.
Yeah. But that's a lot about D&D.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
that's kind of how you got integrated into our friend group, right? And I remember, I hope this is okay to talk about, at the time being like, and this is part of what I talked to Levi about. I was like, okay, he wants to play D&D, and it'd be fun maybe to have another person in D&D, but we kind of not really wanted another person, but we were okay with it. But it wasn't like, man, we really want another person to play with. But at the time I was like, Jaret, you and I had just started to become friends, and as we were, I was noticing you losing friends too. And honestly, probably friends you could have
done without,
right? Like at the time, I just remember like we were getting closer and we were talking more honestly about our lives, and there was a lot of difficulty surrounding that group of people you're hanging out with or living with and that whole situation. But I was like, okay, well, I just remember thinking like, I think God is really telling me like this guy needs a group of friends because he seemingly is losing the ones he has. But also like, Jerry, you've got a good group of friends and you're thankful for them. Why don't you just get him involved with yours? And we've talked about this on the podcast before, right? Like there are people around you that may need that community and you have an opportunity to be like, hey, get involved, right? And Jaret is somebody that like, that I've practiced that with. And I don't mean to say it in a way like you're an experiment. I mean that like, I was like, I think this is what God wants. And so Levi and I talked about it and we're like, yeah, this is something that we should be doing as young men. And it's been one of the better friendships of my life. And so I'm really glad that we did it.
Not to say there weren't times where it was like, man, should we have like done the right thing and brought him in? Well, like, was that the right thing?
Oh,
like,
yeah.
Like throughout some
or even was that the right thing for him?
Yeah.
Right?
And if like, well, yeah.
Well,
Sorry.
the three of us have had this conversation exactly before. And it's awesome that it's like looking back now in hindsight where it's like, okay, it was worth it.
Yeah.
You guys like didn't give up on me, but I mean, you're the best man at my wedding,
It was his wedding that is for the one, we talked about that before. I was the best man in his wedding. That was his.
Your guys's, along with Jude's relationship, I think has been the most impactful in my life. And it's also due to the fact that I was so stupid that I made so many mistakes.
All of us,
and
we all do.
You guys were always there to prop me up. you guys were always there to encourage me and support me, even though I know it had to be so hard. Especially like I brought a lot of grief like directly into your guys' lives. Like where my issues didn't no longer affect me, they also affected you guys. You know? And for the people that don't know me, I've kind of learned a lot about myself recently. Ironically, I was having a casual conversation with a work colleague, found out that he was also a believer. And we had like a 2-hour conversation, which my employer is probably not stoked about. But we just sat in the office and talked for like 2 hours, and I kind of gave my testimony. And then I just started to cry because I hadn't connected the dots of all the time that God's been in my life. And I just didn't see he was there, wasn't looking for him, didn't realize what a blessing he was giving to me, and all the times that I kind of like spit in his face, you know?
I thought that was music.
I did too.
I was like, how? You're like, and all the times I spit in his face, and it's like, whoa.
Yeah.
Like, is Chris in there playing a worship pad to get us really to cry? Sorry, Shibley.
But I kind of grew up without God for like the first 15 years of my life. My mom passed away a month before my 15th birthday. I moved in with my grandma. But that really scorned me. I had a lot of internal issues that I was dealing with. I grew up in a super abusive household. And I kind of, like, looking back now, I kind of see, like, they say everything happens for a reason. But my mom passed away. The place that I was living wasn't great, you know? It was kind of like hoarder style house. It wasn't good. And as tragic as that was, it's God lifting me out of that area, taking me out of a path and kind of fixing it. Brought me to my grandma and great grandma who raised me like their own. They loved me more than anyone has. And I mean, I'm not their kid, but they still raised me, took care of me. I 4.0 student in high school, you know? I took a bunch of AB classes. My grandma was spiritual, but not Christian, I guess I would say. But she always kind of like was pointing me down that path. Like, hey, you need this. And then I'm a kid and I'm dumb, so I just don't listen. And then my senior year of high school, I was kind of dealing with a lot of the issues that have kind of just been building upon me. The loss, just a lot of personal issues. And I remember having like this internal conversation with myself where I kind of had committed to the idea that maybe I don't need to be here anymore. And once I kind of, I had made that decision to where I'm like, okay, tomorrow I'm just going to live as my last day.
Yeah.
And one of my friends from high school, his name's Matthew. We didn't talk. We weren't friends. He was just a football player, someone that we knew. And I remember walking around that Monday, and he came up to me randomly in the hallway, and he's like, hey, what are you doing tonight? And I'm like, I'm not doing anything. And he's like, you should come to Young Life with me tonight. I was like, oh, I don't know. And he's like, yeah, you get a free milkshake if you go your first time. You know, you can
sweet
we go
deal.
to Carl's Jr. afterwards. But he's like, you should totally come. So I was like, took the opportunity. I went. It's kind of what introduced me to God. And I did that, and I went to the Young Life camp that summer. And it really opened me up to God. And I felt, I'm like, okay, there's something to this, you know? But I feel like after I got off that camp high and I kind of went home, I just really kind of fell out of it. I went to college. I made a lot of mistakes in college, a lot of drinking, and then was homeless for a little bit after dropping out of college. Moved in with some friends that didn't have the best, morals and support for me.
That was me. No, I'm just kidding.
But I remember when I was living there and everything, and you were picking me up for work at McKesson, you were like, why don't you just move in with me?
Right.
You know? So we moved in there, but
that was when I was living with my dad. And I remember like part of that was because that living situation, I just remember like you were always telling me like how difficult it was. And I was like, man, if I feel called to like do whatever I can to help you, because something you had talked about, because you knew I was a Christian and I wasn't living my life perfectly. I mean, nobody does, right? But I definitely was like not making the best decisions, but I did feel called to do whatever I could to help you. And I remember being like, if what I'm trying to show you is that there can be friendships in your life where people do care about you, right? And care about sticking around even when it's inconvenient, then I have to put my money where my mouth is in multiple areas of my life, not just being like, yeah, I'm going to invite this guy into my D&D game, right? And I remember talking to you when we were picking it, I would pick you up and you'd be telling me how like, dude, in my life, it just feels like nobody ever really sticks around. And there was a moment where I
remember that conversation.
Yeah. And I remember sitting there going like, I just remember thinking, God just told me, Jerry, you're the one that's going to stick around. Or that it told me like, you're the one that needs to. And I didn't do it perfectly. This isn't me saying like, I remember God saying, you're the one that is going to stick around, and that I always did.
I didn't make it easy either.
Well, but I just mean to say like, I know I didn't always, and I'm sorry for my failings, because, you know, I obviously wasn't always a perfect friend and didn't always stick around. But I remember that being a moment where God was like, he just said, and some of it against, you know, people's better judgment or what they wanted. Like you've had people in your life die, right? Like you talked about your mom, you know, and I hope it's okay to say like your dad, you know, isn't a part of your life, right? And some of that for good reason, but ultimately like the best would be like if you had a dad that had been a part of your life your whole life, right? Because we know statistically speaking, like that's a huge thing in the upbringing of young men. But like, so I was starting to see like, yeah, you know, for Jaret, he hasn't had a choice, and some of the people haven't had a choice whether or not they could stick around in his life. Like your mom had died, and then you had people that were in your life by choice and then were choosing not to be too. And I was like, man, and I remember saying to you, like when you were talking about it, I'm like, no, you know, real friendships are ones where whether it's or real love is like, whether it's convenient or not, people stick around, right? And they choose to love you despite whether you're making it difficult or they're making it difficult or whatever. And it was in that moment where I'm like, well, if I'm going to tell you that this is what it is, God was like, okay, now you need to show him that. And it might take you years. And in my head, I was thinking like, oh, he'll get what I mean by me demonstrating just like being his friend for like a year. And it didn't take a year. And yeah, I hope it's okay that I say that.
Yeah.
But yeah, you moved in with, so I was living with my dad at the time, and we were both working nights at this pharmacy, like our pharmaceutical warehouse. And you lived on my dad's couch for a little bit in our D&D room where like, cause my dad had this big place where it was like half of it was in like industrial for his catering business and the other half was his house. And there was just an extra room, and he let us use it for D&D. And we had this, I'm so sorry, terrible couch. Like it's horrible.
It was pretty bad.
It was great to sleep on.
Really?
Yeah, it was so
think you're the only
soft
person.
and worn in.
I guess like it
and,
would like cradle you.
That's exactly what it did. And
Because
I
the
sleep
springs were
with my
broken.
head buried in the corner. So because the couch naturally just sinks you down into the corner.
No, yeah.
It was great.
That was my problem with it, because I would sink into the corner and then I would just fall into that little space, you know, behind.
Yeah, everybody's
Narnia.
butts sit there.
Narnia
and
is what that's
where I
called.
put my head.
You're like, just don't think about it.
Yeah.
But no, it would just knock you out. Just noxious fumes in there. But no, I remember being like, you know, Jaret, you know, it's not a great situation you're in. I talked to my dad about it. If you want, you can live with us, and this is what we have. And, you know, I think at first it was kind of like, I don't know if that's really better. Like, I imagine that's probably what it felt like. But that was honestly so much fun. I mean, it probably wasn't fun necessarily. And I remember talking to you like, man, my back hurts all the time on this couch. But like, that was such a fun time getting to have one of my friends live with me and my family, right? Because I was out of high school. I had dropped out of college, and I was just working this job that paid pretty well for, you know, my age and my living situation. and I was spending my money terribly. And I mean, that's part of, yeah, that's part of my life that if I talked about my testimony more, I would say like, that's some of my least proud that I would be of my life. But you know, that's something interesting to see how God can still use us, even in the moments where it's like, that's the time of my life I'd go like, that's where I was the worst. God can still use you, you know? But no, like that was so cool because during that time, I remember talking to my dad and being like, hey, you know, my dad's big on going, you're just one of my kids. You know, people that he cares about who work for him or whatever it is, he just likes to say that and he means it. You know, it's like, I'm going to treat you like you're just one of my kids. And he loves to do that.
I had the J name.
There you go.
Yeah.
And he said that when he was on the podcast.
You're
you know,
closer
like,
to him than I can ever be because of that J name.
True. Because he has done the same with Levi, right?
He's,
Levi and Byron, he's like, these are my kids. And when you work for him, it's just how he is. But I remember sitting down and being like, Dad, you do this with people. And I know you mean it. But I was like, I want Jaret to know like that you mean it more, right? Like, how can we really make him part of our family? And so that was cool because I remember there being a day where I went, you know, Jaret, you really are my brother. You know, like that. This is real, and I wanted it to be that way because then I was like, well, how can we take it beyond just like, Jaret, I want to show you that people are going to love you even when it's difficult, or whether you're making it difficult or I'm making it difficult, whatever. But I want to show you that like, even though in your life circumstances have kind of removed your own family from you, like that doesn't mean that you won't have one, right? And that God will provide. And I remember being like, talking to my dad about it. Yeah, but you should talk more than I should talk about this. Sorry, but I just was thinking like I haven't really thought about this in a while, and those are conversations that you may not know have happened. But I remember having that conversation with my dad and him being like, "Okay, yeah, how do we do that?" You know, and we talked about. That was where I think he was like, "Okay, then yeah, he can live with us for sure." Like he wasn't opposed to it, but it was like, "Yeah, we'll give him a place to sleep," and you know, and that was a fun time, you know.
Yeah. Well, and you kind of brought up too. It's like. That was a big part of your best man speech also was the people that stick around. And I think how I grew up affects me a lot still today. I dealt for a long time with a lot of just mental health issues and depression. And I just longed for that connection and relationship, which I now like I have my wife and kids who I'll talk about soon, but it's like that connection and relationship could have been with Jesus the whole time, you know? And he was giving me signs and reaching out and trying to have that connection with me. And I just wasn't seeing it or wasn't trying to see it.
Right.
And I put myself in these positions where I wanted that relationship so bad. So I would get into a relationship with the wrong people, working at McKesson, you know, it's like I got into an awful relationship. It affected not only me, but you guys also.
Because at that time we all moved out together and got a place to live together.
Yeah.
Sorry.
And also because of that relationship, I really dove into substance abuse. I had a drug addiction and it ate all my money. It caused so much grief. And then that relationship that I wanted and I asked for was not the relationship that I should have. And when that finally ended, I remember driving to your dad's house at like 3 a.m. and just crying, sobbing. Hey, he met me outside, you know. And it's like we weren't living with him at the time.
Yeah.
And I love your dad so much. Like I call him my papa and everything. Whenever I talk to people, I always refer to him as my dad. And I remember just sobbing and talking to him, and he's like, we all warned you. And
that's one of those tough dad things.
He was just so blunt, and he's like, you fought us over this for so long, and now you can see that we were right. And it's just like I really needed to hear that.
Yeah.
And after that relationship ended, I got even more into drugs. And I remember we were having like a Bible study that we were doing like here and there at the house, and
we were going through John, which in hindsight I realized was a mistake, not because of anything, but it's like if we're like, hey, let's try and start you somewhere and really give you, John is very theological.
Yeah.
It's a hard one to start with. We should have started with Mark, but go ahead.
Yeah.
Sorry.
And so you guys were texting me and you're like, hey, do you want to come meet us for Bible study? I'm like, oh yeah, sure. And I was leaving somewhere and you're texting me, you're like, hey, are you close? And I open the door and it's like all these people. It's you, David, Jude, Levi, Papa.
Yeah.
It's like the whole family basically, you know, like all of us that were super close, living together. Papa, David was there. And like straight up had like old fashioned intervention, you know? And I had never seen your dad cry about not his family, you know, when it came to stuff he was convicted about with you or Jude or things going on. And like, I'd never seen him like cry over the business or anything, but I made him cry sitting there and I felt awful. And I said the classic, oh, I can quit whenever I want. And as soon as I heard that, I'm like, oh.
That's the thing everyone says.
And you guys told me, it's like, this needs to stop or you're out. We can't. We love you and we want to be a part of our lives, but the things you are doing, we can't do this forever. And we can't keep putting it around ourselves. And I quit that day, cold turkey. It was January 17th, 2020, you know?
Not to say like probably one of the hardest things for you in your life was hard for me too, but I will say that
It was
because speaking from my point of view, being like, I'm going to be like God said, be the one that's consistent, be the one that's there. I'm like, I feel like I'm giving up on that. But I remember just praying about it for so long and being like, I think this is the play. Like, not to make it sound like it was a play, but like to say to you, Jaret, you know, and I remember saying like, I'm still going to love you and I'm still going to consistently be someone you can come to, and I will love you and I will tell you the truth, but there will now be boundaries that there weren't before. That was kind of my point. Like there will be boundaries that weren't here before because, and here's why the Bible says that that's right. Like, because I can't allow like your decisions. Yeah, there's something we say, Matt and I have talked about a lot in Christian influence, like within the community. When someone starts to be more of a negative influence on the people than they are being positively influenced, there has to come a point where you make a decision. Like, do we, you know, the Bible says, turn them over to the destruction of their flesh so that their spirit may be saved, right? And that was kind of where we were at with you. I remember us being like, at some point we have to say like, Jaret, you might have to lose it all. But this time realize that you lost it because something you did. You know, I hope that that's okay that I say that. I don't want to make you feel bad, but because I had noticed in your life how things have been taken from you and like out of your control. But this is an opportunity maybe for you to see like sometimes you do things that are the reason, you know. And I remember being like, dude, this is. I mean, he's my friend, so I don't want to lose my friend. But also, I was so afraid I'm going to hate myself for maybe being one youth feeling like, oh, Jerry told me forever ago, hey, I won't be one of those people that doesn't stick around. And then you go, looks like he is too, right? And that's what I was so scared of, was like in your head and being one of the ones that also did the same thing that I saw had happened to you and been like, that I won't do that to you, you know? Even though I was like, I think this is right, but I didn't want to be perceived that way.
I can't remember what I was thinking in the moment.
Right.
Of that, like what I was thinking of you, like if I had those thoughts or not. I don't believe I did, but I do remember specifically just being like, all of you around me are too important to lose. Like, it's one of the first times in my life that I'm like, this is my family, and I have to do everything I can to not lose it. So I promised that I would quit, and I did. I never faltered. Even
that was incredible, by the way.
That was like, honestly, we were like afterward, like after that had like we like started going into other rooms having separate conversations, and we're like, do you think that this even like did anything? Because it felt so like discouraging because you were saying I can quit whenever I want. I'm good. I'm done. I'll just throw it out and I'll be good. And it was like, oh no, like, was this even like a fruitful endeavor at all? And then we were having, and like, I don't know about you, but like, I was constantly in that mindset, like, oh no, like, it felt like how it is in the movies, you know, where it's like, oh yeah, I'll quit. And then they just go right back into it. Yeah. And like, you hear that story a lot of like that happening. And that was constantly in my head. And we're like, we just have to wait and see. We just have to wait and see.
Yeah.
And it was honestly like, it took me a long time before I even believed that you had, because it was so wild of an like a change from that point. And like, good on like,
yeah, no, like I
can't
never
imagine.
faltered.
I can't imagine how difficult that.
I talked to my wife about it. I still think about it, and I still be like those thoughts always come across, and I know now that I have been given too much to ever let that affect me again.
That's so, you know, when from a spiritual perspective, you know, we have to do things. We have to remember, you know, this is we've talked about this a lot with communion. I'd be curious to know, like, in your life, what are the things, but I think we should talk about that a little bit later, but so let's put a pin in it. But the things in your life, and I would imagine your family now, being married and having kids, but the things in your life that are kind of like the purpose that communion serves in the life of the believer, to always remind us of who it is that has saved us, who has done the work. Remember what Jesus had to do for us to be saved, right? Like, I wonder what the communions kind of like the are that are in your life that keep it so that you don't get slippery slope back into it. You know what I mean?
You want to know the conversation?
Horrible, but
you want to know the exact conversation I think about almost daily? Is after that straight up intervention.
Just before that intervention, though, there's something I think it'll be hard to come back to this, and I do want to hear this, but and I hope it's okay if we say this. I think because we were talking about how incredible it is that you went and stopped. And so I want to real quick stay on that topic.
That was God working in me.
Yes.
That wasn't me at all.
But what I want to point out about how God used it, I think, is that, because you alluded to this, and we don't have to focus on it, but I think it's important that people just know, I think part of what was able to help make it such a quick thing is just how bad it had gotten. And I don't want to just like be the guy, like, let's focus on how bad things got.
I was spending $500 a weekend.
But not just the money. Like, there's a specific day where I was the most scared as your friend.
Yeah, dude.
And Levi, it was you, me, and Levi, this experience. And this is where, and unfortunately for a very funny reason, this day comes to my mind often, because it's the same day I put Matt Canaire's number in my phone. So every time I look at Matt, his contact on my phone, it says Matt Candidaragani, because I didn't know how to spell his name. But that's unrelated. But because of that, now I think about this day often, but I'm glad I do. Because it was like a defining day for our friendship. But it was just when like the drug situation, the relationship with that girl, everything had gotten to its worst. Are you okay if I talk about this?
Yeah.
Levi and I had no idea where you were. And there was a day where
I also disappear.
Yeah.
Like, that's something that I shut everything away. When things are going bad or I'm upset, I isolate.
Yeah.
And
that's dangerous.
Led to a lot of dangerous situations.
But I just wanted to bring that up because this was before the intervention, right? Yeah. And that was for me going like, at this point, you know, because when I said like that intervention day, I was scared, like, is this the right thing? Is it the wrong thing? This is what drove me to being like, even if it means I don't get to have my friend anymore, I'm willing to give that up if it means it's what's best for him, because it had gotten to that point. And Levi and I had talked. That's what really drove a lot of that conversation. But that day was scary because we knew that, you know, the drug stuff was still going on, and she was a big part of that. But when we didn't know where you were, Levi and I were like, well, he said he was taking her home to Wilsonville. Like, we're going to drive to Wilsonville because like the last thing we had heard from you was really dark and we were really worried. And I remember driving to Wilsonville and then finally hearing, you know, you finally calling us back, and we like pulled over on this, you know, off of I-5 real quick. And you're like, I am coming home. I'm on my way back. And we were just like I'm just like crying because we've been praying. Like,
I was sobbing.
Oh yeah.
I couldn't get words out.
Yes. And that day where that happened, we get back to the house and we were just sitting in your car. And that was where I felt like, man, like something has to work, because you, me, and Levi sitting in your car, you know, Levi, I don't want to make it sound like you were less invested than I was, but at the time it felt like you were more skeptical, like you said, right? When it, like the things changed. And I was like, I don't know if this is going to work, but I believe this, God called me to this, and you don't have to be involved if you don't want to. I felt like God called me to this, but I would love the partner in helping, right? Mm-hmm. But that was where I was like so grateful for you being involved too, because when we're sitting there praying, like it was your idea. You're like, we need to pray, you know, and we're and he's sitting there like crying, and I'm crying, and you're crying, and you're like, we need to pray about this. And we prayed for like 30 minutes sitting in your car. Mm-hmm. And I remember being like, man, yeah, I don't know where I was going with that. I just wanted to say, like, there was a significant low point that it really came to, and it got really dark.
Yeah. That was
really scary.
Like one of the scariest days.
Yeah.
Like, because we
probably
like,
one of the scariest days of my life.
Yeah.
Like,
because I remember.
Sorry.
No, you're.
I remember staying up, and then your brother actually came to the house. I think that was it that day?
Really? I don't remember that.
But I know that it was like the one of the like really, really scary days. Mm-hmm. And your brother showed up, and I'm like, he finally got to sleep. Mm-hmm. Like, I know that's really big, and like, but he's finally like to a place that he's asleep right now. Like I was staying up until you guys had to get up to go to work. But like,
oh yeah, I remember asking you to do that
because like we had very different schedules. I was working swing shift and they were working night shift.
Yeah.
So I just stayed up like until you guys had to get up for work, because it was.
And at this point, when we actually, like, everything came to an end, he couldn't afford to call in to work, or he'd have gotten fired. Mm-hmm. I was like, oh man, if he's fine, he'll go to work and I'll just stay home and sleep, because it was like, we have to be at work in 2 hours. Mm-hmm. When all that was said and done, we had to be at work in 2 hours. And I'm like, Levi, you know, we basically need to be on watch, make sure that nothing happens to Jaret. Can you stay up? I'm going to sleep for an hour and a half and then get ready to go to work and take him to work. And I'm really glad we did it that way. But yeah, I forgot about that part of it.
So like, you had just gotten to sleep, and I was like, he needs to sleep because he has to go into work. Like, there's no other option like for him right now.
Yeah.
And like that, I don't know if you knew about that or not.
I didn't know. My brother showed up, but
I don't think I knew either, because I was asleep.
Yeah,
I don't think you ever told me about that.
I thought that I had, but I guess I hadn't.
Maybe you didn't. I forgot.
Like that was the only time that I've ever actually met him.
He worked at the ballpark a little while, but
I knew who he was. You know.
No, I think my grandma probably sent him over because I like during that had basically like said goodbye to her. You know.
Yeah.
But I had a good conversation with him at the time. Yeah. But that was. Man.
Not to just be I'm sorry if I was like, hey, let's start. You were about to talk about like something that was important that like come back to.
Sorry.
But I only brought that up to say, you know, this is something that Matt has said in sermons a lot. You know, he doesn't want anyone to ever have to be like, you have to, like King David, get to the point where you lose everything. Mm-hmm. And then that's where you go, all I have left is God. And honestly, I don't even know if you would say that was the point where you went, all I have left is God, right? Mm. But sometimes that's how the story goes. Like, you have to get to a point where it's like you're at absolutely your lowest. And the only reason I brought that up was to say, like, I think because all that stuff had happened, that might have played a part in why you really had this strength like I've never seen to be like, I'm addicted to this drug, and it was over. Yeah, like that was like God did that.
And in hindsight now, it's like I know that was God.
Yeah.
In the moment, I was like, I'm doing pretty good.
I feel pretty good about myself.
But the moment that the conversation I think about almost daily.
Yes.
Is after that, you and I went to go get pho, and we were
Vietnamese noodles.
Yeah.
PHO for those that might not know. It sounds a little suspicious.
And I think we came back home and we were just sitting out front of the house, and you were asking how I was doing. And I remember I was like, I wanted a relationship, and talking about my ex at that point. And you sat there and you told me, you're like, if you want a wife and you want a family, why would God provide that for you when this is the person you are? If these are the choices you're making and these things you're doing are not going to benefit or help grow someone else, and you want to be a father and these choices are not going to be teaching your children what you should do, why would God provide that for you? And I think every day, why would God provide that for me? I hear you say that in my head every day. Why would he do that? And it's the reason that I've made a lot of the choices that I have now.
I didn't know that.
That conversation is one of the biggest in my life. Why would he provide that for you? What am I doing to deserve that?
Yeah, I don't think so. I don't think my point there was like, you have to earn it. Why would he provide? Because God gives us things we don't deserve all the time.
Correct.
Yeah.
But
it's like
why would he bring someone into my life when
Right.
I'm not the right person for them? When I'm not doing stuff that's going to glorify him, why would he give me that partner?
Right.
And that is the moment that I decided to work on myself.
Yeah.
I came back to Freddy's. I talked to my wife about it because we had dated briefly when I went back to Freddy's, and then that fell out pretty quickly. And then the moment that I had kind of decided all right, Jerry talks about not everyone gets married, and sometimes God has a plan for you to be single,
And I'll be honest, those things I said to you were as much for me as they were for you.
And we had a lot of those conversations.
Because you and I both, one thing that we bonded over quickly was what we both want, and Levi too. This is some of my best friends I have in my life. It's because we all have one of the same exact goals. It's more than anything, we want to be husbands and fathers.
Yeah.
We just want that. And I remember being saying that to you, and I was like, man, not to use the word copium, that's a bad context for it, but this is something I'm telling myself, and I have to believe it too,
But it's the moment that I had kind of stuck to that and been okay, this is my life. I'm going to work on myself. And I wouldn't even say that I was coming closer to God in that time. I was just you junkie, stop,
And if this is what I want
yourself.
and this is what I have to do, then I will do it.
So I just started becoming just a better person, not even growing with Jesus, just becoming a better person. And almost immediately, my wife came back into my life. She got transferred to the store that I was
hadn't
working
been your
in.
wife at that point, right? Yeah. Okay.
No, we had dated briefly
Yeah.
and then stopped. And then 9 months, a year later, she got transferred to the same store that I was working at. And we started talking again. We started going out. And I'm the man I am today because of her helping me grow. She always is she has been the structure that I needed to stop being a boy and become a man. We just bought our first house.
Nice.
Last month, I just paid the mortgage for the first time. And that's incredibly expensive. But everything I've done, rebuild my credit from being dumb. She has 2 children that I have now become their father and stepped in there. And I struggle with patience and anger. I have a temper, never to the point of hitting,
Right.
but I have a short fuse and I yell.
Yeah.
So having children has been a huge impact for learning how to cope with those skills. My wife talks with them constantly. It's one of our it's literally our only point is parenting. Is we differ on that because I was raised very structured and strict, and these kids are very much more loose and free. And things that I consider to be an issue, she's it doesn't matter. You need to pick your battles,
Yeah.
And so that's been a huge growth for me. But God brought her into my life, and she's helped me just become a man and grow even more. And I remember being stressed out about stuff, and I'm to the point where I'm talking with her in bed, just crying over something, and she's have you prayed about it? She just asked me that. She's have you prayed about it? And I was no, I haven't. So we sat there and we prayed about it, and literally the next day, it's I felt like I was walking on clouds. Like everything was just so easy.
Wow.
And that's why I texted you. It's like,
Yeah.
I forget the power of prayer sometimes.
I remember
And
that
it's
text.
like,
Yeah.
yeah.
That wasn't even that long. That was like within a year, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was probably within like 6 months.
Yeah.
But
That's the sign of a good wife, man.
Yeah.
Someone who, like a good spouse who goes, hey, you're struggling, point you to God.
Yeah.
Hey, you're happy, point you to God. Like in everything, point you to God. Like that's something Perry and I have talked a lot about. Like we have to make sure that that's what we're doing in everything, pointing the other to God. Basically like being, one and ensuring that as a unit you are pointed upward. But I interrupted you. Sorry.
yeah, no, she does that stuff all the time.
Good.
And it's like, I remember, I don't know if you remember, I texted you years ago and I was like, at what point do you mess up too much?
I remember. Yeah.
That God.
I remember exactly where I was.
Yeah. God, that you failed too much for God, basically. And he sent me a few pieces of scripture.
Romans.
And it just uplifted me. I'm like, okay, all right, so it's not too late, so I can work on that. And with my wife constantly pointing me to it, it's like no matter how many times I fail, like I prayed for patience. I now have 2 kids, and I fail every opportunity God gives me for patience. So it's like I'm working on that. My wife is just, she's the love of my life, and she's helped me grow. Like I'd say you guys saved my life,
God did, man.
and then God brought my wife in to help me use my life for him. You guys brought me out of the pit, and now she's taking me on the path, if that makes sense.
That's beautiful.
But she told me, she's like, well, if you want to go to church, because you guys have been asking me for 8 years to come to church. And
hey, never give up. It works.
It does. And we never have weekends off because of our work schedule and childcare. But we happened to have one Sunday off, so we went to church.
Yeah.
And my wife talked to me after church, and she's like, you just look like you belong there. And she's like, why don't you just go every Sunday? I'm like, well, I don't have Sundays off. She's like, well, if you close,
Yeah.
so if you work till 11, you'll be able to go to church. So now every Sunday I just close. And so then I can go to church. And it's like everything has been falling in line, I feel like, lately. And I've been a believer, and I've heard the gospel, and I just felt like I was always just kind of like sitting on the fence, And when I shared my testimony with that coworker.
Right.
And I looked back, I'm like, my mom passed away. It's like such a hard part of my life. God was lifting me out of a spot I shouldn't have been in and put me in structure. And then I graduated high school, and I left the structure of my grandma, and guess what? I fall again. Homelessness, drug addiction, everything. And God had already brought you into my life and been like, okay, come on, he's being stupid again. Get him out of it. And that intervention was you guys lifting me up again and bringing me out of the pit again. And as soon as I'm asking for relationships and everything, and I'm being given what I asked, and what I asked for is not what I needed.
Yeah.
I taught that lesson. My wife gets brought into my life once I start making the good choices, because I'm like, hey, I need to work on myself. And God said, here's a partner who will help fix you. Here's someone that I will work through that will show you how you should be.
Yeah, because the point of what I had been trying to say then, was like, if you want a wife and you are claiming to be a believer, right? And you were, because if I had asked you, then you would say like, yeah, I believe, right? But it's like, then you have to know what it means to be a husband as a believer. And I remember being like, why I said that, and that you said that conversation, you remember, is like, why would God give you a wife that you're going to be a bad husband to, right? And I remember being like, man, I really hope that didn't feel terrible to say, but like that's, like if you're going to be a husband, God would want you to be a husband that would do it right. So why would he bring the person that is the right? Because you're always like, I feel like I'm never going to get the right girl. Like I never get the right girl. And it's like, why would he bring you the right one if you're going to be the wrong one to her? Like that was my point, right?
And that's what I think about.
Yeah. I'm glad I really didn't remember exactly what I had said until you started saying that. And I was like, I guess I did say that. Like it's cool to hear. I mean, I've had someone else recently tell me like, you said this to me, and I was like, I don't remember saying that now until you said that. But, you know, it's like, it's cool to know how God uses, even when we're not like tracking what we're saying.
So it's weird because I feel like a lot of people, and Matt talked about this at church, is like, I hope you don't hit that low point where all you have is God. Like, I hope you don't need to reach there.
Yeah.
And I felt like I reached there and I didn't realize it. Like I didn't use it as the opportunity to turn to God. But I just, like a couple months ago, you know, I'm giving that testimony, and I kind of like looked back, and I feel like that's the first time outside from like our D&D group that I've had a conversation about my faith with someone that I didn't know, you know? And he told me a lot about his life, and I started giving my testimony, and as I was saying the events that happened in my life, I saw how God was in it. And I saw when I asked for something, it was given, always. And a lot of times it was something I shouldn't have asked for.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, God answers prayers, and sometimes it's what we don't need, but it is what we want, but he does it, and so that he can use it to point us to him, right?
And like plucking me out of every situation and walking with me in every situation. And we had that conversation at the end of the day. So like we wrapped with that conversation, and then we went home, and I got in my car and I just started crying.
After the conversation with your coworker?
Yeah, because I had that conversation with him, and I just sat in self-reflection. And it was the first time that I kind of really realized God in my life. And I just felt so awful that I didn't see it before.
I've been there, man.
And like I cried with Matt about it. I'm like, I can't believe that I haven't seen this. And I can't believe that I have gone all this time saying like I'm a believer and not believing and not seeing, you know. God has provided in my life more than I could ever ask for. He's given me my brothers, my family. He's given me a wife and 2 beautiful children. And I had realized in that moment that it's like he brought everything to me when I needed it. And I can't believe that I haven't recognized it and been so thankful. And that's when I talked to Matt and told him, asked him about baptism, because I realized like God is my number one in life. Because even when I didn't realize he was there, he was always there. Whether it was him alone, whether it was through you guys, whether it's through my wife, God has always been there and is the reason that I am still here today. I'm so emotional now.
I'm sorry. You're like, hey, you want to be on the podcast? Sure, yeah. We're going to make you cry.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No,
I'm proud of you.
I finally have realized, you know, that God is number one. I need to be devoted to him, and I need to read and learn his word because it's the only thing that matters, you know? And I'm just incredibly grateful for everyone he's put in my life and for you guys. Because like I said, I wouldn't be here without you, you know? And I wouldn't be able to have my family without you guys. And if it wasn't for you guys, I wouldn't have been opened up to God and been so blessed and truly saved, and understanding everything in this world comes through him. And I just hope that my story and my hardships, I know that God is using me. There's going to be people who go through addiction. There's going to be people who battle with mental health issues and, you know, thoughts of ending it. And I've never been happier. I know I'm crying, but I've never been happier than in this moment. and it's because of God. And I
There you go.
hope that God will use me to bring more people to him, because I wasn't an easy one, you know? So now I just see all the work that he did for me. Like, why me? Why am I important? You know? And I see that. So it's like, I need to do everything I can to bring him to others, or bring others to him, I should say.
Dude, that's the right reaction to a life being saved. Sorry, go ahead, Levi.
Oh, I was gonna say, like, I knew about a lot of what had happened, like with your like growing up, and like at least in part, you know, and like living through the situations with you for like my side of what's going on.
Yeah.
And it was difficult, like obviously at times, but it's so incredible to be able to look back and see in all of the different ways that God, and I'm sure that there's way more that we're not even seeing, like of how God has impacted you on such a personal level in so many steps all across your life. Even when you were trying to run away from him, he was using things that like people around you were causing to be evil. Because like if like he used those bad relationships with people like walking away from you to show like that he would never walk away from you. And like because we're not perfect, like, and he's using our like me and Jerry were not perfect, and we were in a worse place then when we were trying to help you as well. And it's so incredible to see how God uses bad situations for his glory to show how good he is in all of it, and it's an active force in your life.
Yeah.
Like, and like with Matt, that guy that came to you in high school, I think his name was Matt.
Yeah.
Like, because he must have been called by God to do that. And I doubt that he knows at all how much God used that moment.
That was the seed, right?
Like that
The
was
seed.
And he may be watching this, but I doubt that he knows how impactful that one asking you to come to, and like going to that youth group has drastically changed everything.
And like Greg said, remember when this is something that we've you know, it's very Christianese to say, but we talked about with that on that last episode with Greg. You don't always see the touchdown. Matthew there in high school didn't see the touchdown, dude. But God used Matthew, like you just said, that was the seed. And like, man,
like I'm so thankful for that he listened to God in that moment and asked you, because you said you weren't even friends.
No, we had less than 2 conversations probably all the time in high school. We were in school for 3 years together, and I think we probably had like 2 conversations at that point.
And like in just one facet, just like listen to God, like when he's asking you to do things that are, because that must have been uncomfortable to ask you. And but doing that got, because like seeing like how your life has changed has really affected my life in seeing how God works in things and how God doesn't give up. So we shouldn't give up on people either. Like, because like it was really difficult.
I mean, I
like we and I feel, because I failed at times, like a lot, and I'm not saying like, but God never did in anything that happened to you. And
there's a period of time where I was like, man, I dropped the ball on you. Like I was like, I told you I'd be consistent, and there was a period of time where I was like, I know I haven't been, and I didn't know how to jump back in. And I remember thinking like I was going to be the reason that like you didn't make it, you know? Because like I was like, I feel like, you know, I don't know if I was just like, I'm the anime protagonist or whatever, like, but God called me to be the one to do this, and then I dropped it, you know? And that was where God was showing me like, dude, it's not just you, but I didn't just call you, but it's like, it was that I had kind of put this ultimatum on God where I was like, yeah, I'll stay consistent. And I said that from the beginning, but then later it was like, I kind of only want to stay consistent, God, if I get to see the touchdown, if I get to see it. And I remember there being a moment where I went, you know, and I'm glad that it sounds like this Matthew guy did it better than I did from the start. But like, even if I don't ever get to see Jaret live his life for you, I'm just going to trust that God, that he will. And if that means that I don't get to be his friend anymore because it was too hard what he had to hear, but it had to come from me, means that we don't get to be friends, like in that we talked about earlier. But the thing, like for me, that I can't get over is the fact that, like, dude, I'm getting to see it. And we have to be grateful for that, Levi. Because like that Matthew guy, you know, maybe that Matthew, you guys weren't really friends, so maybe he didn't know like how much you needed it, but you know, everybody should know like that everybody needs it. But like I decided a long time ago, like I may never see it, but I got to stay committed because that's what I promised you too, but I promised it to God. And I know God used that in my life to really change a lot of my life as well. Like that. So you need to know, like God used you in my life as much as I think he used me in yours and Levi, right? Because like Levi was saying, like seeing how God has used what he's done in your life has made an impact on him. I know that God was testing my faith essentially, being like, are you really in this because it's the right thing to do, or are you in it because you want to lead someone to righteousness and feel righteous? And you know, I don't know if maybe like that caused it to take longer because the way I was acting there, but there was a time where I sat in prayer just like, God, you are right. I stopped doing the right thing in the right way because I started going like, I'm not seeing what I want, even though it's a good thing that I want to see, which is you dedicated your life to Christ. I'm not seeing it, and so I stopped doing what I was supposed to be doing. And you talk about this moment where you saw all the dots connect, and I've talked on this podcast about a moment where I had very similar, and it's cool to hear you use kind of the same terminology. But for me, I was saying like it felt like constellations that have always been there, these beautiful pictures in the stars that I hadn't noticed. But then I started seeing these moments in my life, and when you connect them, it's this beautiful picture, this tapestry of how God was always there. And like, dude, we're not promised that moment, like to get to see it. Mm-hmm. And the thing to remember is like, you might not even be seeing all of it, like Levi said, but dude, cherish that you've seen that, and like, don't forget it, because that can push you to continue and to remain steadfast in serving him. But I'm so grateful that I get to sit here now and to get to hear you say that, because there was a time in my life where I'm like, I'm just deciding I'm okay if I don't see it. God's in control. And if some other guy down the road who it feels like, nah, he never did any of the work, I was the one in the trenches, like, I don't care, because to God be the glory. But dude, I get to see it. And I'm so happy that I get to see it in your life. And I've gotten to see like some of the hardest things I've ever witnessed firsthand, the things that I've been like, man, these are like the things that are in movies. I told Levi that a lot. I'd be like, this is the kind of stuff that doesn't happen for real. Like, what is going on in our life right now? And then to sit here now and to have just recently, you know, been like, man, Jaret's going to church. Like, dude, I prayed for that for so long, you know. And sometimes there's other people I've prayed that haven't gone to church, and I've invited them and I want them to go and they don't. And it feels like, man, it doesn't matter, because like I keep asking and they keep saying no. But like, dude, I asked you for a while and here you are. Like, you're going now. And then sitting there in church one week and Matt just mentions baptism, and I just went, oh man, Jaret's here for this and he's hearing it. And I've noticed in him, he's caring now. Like, this is all I've ever prayed for him. And I like turned around and looked at you and I saw you just kind of go like, huh, like nod. And I just was like, oh, praise God, man. Like, and then hearing Matt say like, hey, Jaret, and I saw you go talk to him, but then afterward he's like, hey, Jaret came up and talked to me about this. I was like, oh, I was just so happy, you know, like, yeah, it's like one of the greatest privileges of my life to have been able to be your friend, and for God to, Christians need to realize that it should be seen as a privilege to be used by God, and it doesn't matter how it happens, you know. And in some ways, I feel like I don't deserve to be here at this point and wherever it goes from forward. Like, if it had gone the right way, that I wouldn't be here for the touchdown, you know, that someone else would. And that's just because I beat myself up when I shouldn't. And because I feel that way, I have to remember, like, I have to thank God, you know? And that goes for all three of us in our own rights. But, like, that, dude, it's just the coolest thing ever. And you know, what I told you at the beginning, you know, I'm committed. I'm sticking around. Hold me accountable to that, because now that it maybe in some ways got a little easier, I better not back off. I'm sticking around. But I love you, Jaret, and I'm so proud of you. And it is one of the greatest honors of my life that I get to say that at this point in your spiritual life. To be able to say, like, I see in you now a man who's devoted to God for the right reasons, because you know that he saved you, and you know all you can do, because you can't save yourself, all you can do is live your life for him in devotion and gratitude, right? And that's all we have. And to see that in you is like one of the greatest gifts God has ever given me. And I'm very grateful for it. So thank you, man. I'm so proud of you.
I love you guys, man.
I love you too.
I love you more than you would ever know. And I'm so excited to, like, I don't have that history in church, you know? I haven't read through the Bible. You know, I've read the gospel. I've read Job and Romans. Now I get to go through and I get to hear the work of God basically for like the first time. Like, we just went through 1 Samuel. I'm going through and listening to a lot of Chad's sermons.
Good. Chad's a great preacher, man.
Levi sent me some Tim Mackey stuff, so I'm listening to Daniel right now. He goes through that. Mm-hmm. But I'm so excited to just live with and for God, and I finally have that realization, you know, that it's like, hey, you've been here the whole time, and I don't know why it took so long, but I can finally see you, and now I'm excited.
Don't lose sight of that, man.
Yeah,
I'm so excited now that it feels like we've like for me and Jerry, like, come to that like mountaintop, like we see the end in sight, but now God can actively use you, and the amount that so much investment into you. Like, I wonder how,
it makes no sense
where God will take you to help further the kingdom, and I want to see how much of an impact now that can be made, like,
well,
by
Jerry
you
used
and
to
your
say-
life.
Jerry used to say, anytime I thanked him for anything or said I appreciated anything, Jerry would always say, all the good in me is God. And it's my turn to live that now.
Yeah. And I can't wait to see how God uses you to now you're on, like, you're fully invested on the right team, you know?
There's few things I've been more confident in than that God is going to use you incredibly, man. Because, like, you're right. A lot of time has been invested in you, but that's true of every believer, right? Mm-hmm. But, like, remembering that, like, time has been invested in you by God, and he's used people to do that. And, like, when hard work is put in, like from a business perspective, hard work is put in, like, a big gain is brought out of it. And I don't mean to say, like, some prosperity gospel nonsense, but, like, there's a profit and a reward. There's a worker is worth their wages, and God has done a good work in you, and God will have his wage from it. Mm-hmm. God has put a lot of work into you, and I'm confident that there will be a great reaping because of it. And just don't lose sight of what he's done in your life. And dude, it's going to be, you know, you're like, I'm so excited, and I don't want to, like, be like, oh, the cynical realist or whatever. It is going to be the ride of a lifetime. It already has been, right? And it will keep doing that. But sometimes there will be a struggle that is like, it doesn't feel like it's a ride anymore. It feels like it's a slog, or it feels like maybe it was always wrong. This is where discipline, and you were talking earlier about like, you can see how God brought you out of chaos into discipline and order. And that was like how he was like reaching you multiple times. Establishing now, when you're feeling it, discipline, so that when you're not feeling it, you have something to fall back on, which is that consistency is so important, right? And so at this beginning, you're like, yeah, I'm soaking it in. Establish in your life routine and habit and discipline, because so often I have experienced this, and I hear this from other people. It's like, I don't feel God anymore, but I had that mountaintop experience where I felt him. Like, it's a long one right now. You're feeling it, right? I'm confident that there'll be times where you don't. If you establish when you're feeling it, the discipline necessary, so that when you're not, you have something to fall back on, and so you can remain in what you know is true rather than what you're not feeling like is true sometimes. That is huge. And I'm glad to hear that you are. Because, there's something really true about the way that Satan works. And that is, he kind of doesn't care about you if you're not being effective for the Lord. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, he got you stuck in a big rut of your flesh and what you wanted in life, and he basically gave you what you wanted, right? I mean, I think it's safe to say he's going to find new ways to attack you now, because even in this moment, right, you're being used by God effectively, and man, he doesn't stand for it. And he is an enemy not to be feared, because he is defeated by God. He has been, he will be, we know. And through God, you will see the defeat of him in your life. But, like, you don't want to undersell him like he's not smart, in the sense that now he knows, like, dude, this guy cares, and this guy wants to be used by God. I'm going to do whatever I can. I'm going to ramp it up, right? And I just say that, like, also to encourage you, like, establish those spiritual disciplines now. And this is for the people listening too, like, and I'm glad to hear that you are, and I didn't think that you weren't, but it's just like hearing it. It's like, man, I saw you going to church. I'm like, that's an important spiritual discipline. You go, like, even when you don't want to, doing whatever you can, like, to get your whole family there, right? Like, that's a big deal. Like, but I can just see in you that, like, you care about leading them now, right? And not that you didn't at the beginning. I just mean, like, you care about leading them. Like, that's so important. And reading the word, seeking to understand it, those things that are disciplines, the discipline doesn't save you, but the discipline is devotion to the one that does. And that's really important, so, yeah.
I make a point that every time I pray now, the first thing I do is thank God.
Good.
And I think it's important, because everything we have is because of him. Mm-hmm. But I think I prayed at church last week, and I made a point that it's like, we should pray always, as often as we can, but it shouldn't just be for help. And when things are bad, it's so important to pray for praise and thanks when things are good, because that comes from God as well.
Yeah.
So I've just been, especially like having my eyes opened, and I don't know why it was that moment, but I'm just incredibly grateful, and I will always pray for praise and thanks before anything else.
I think it's that's something I try and do as well. I think it's great. It's so cool to hear too that, like, the moment where you had, like, you saw everything connecting the dots is when you were just kind of like talking about, like, oh yeah, this is like with another believer who's being inquisitive. God did the same thing for me. Like, that's the thing I've talked about on the podcast. Another believer being inquisitive and just being like, hey, what is this in your life? And I started going like, oh, this. And I'm being like, hey, I got to go. And then I just wept. Yeah. Like, wow. And then it's like, blah, 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 blah.
As soon as I saw it, I just felt overwhelmed.
Yeah.
And
there's like, how could you, there's a guy named William Wilberforce, I just talked about him at youth group, and too long of a story to get into right now, but you should look him up if you're not familiar. But God used him essentially to abolish the slave trade back in the day. And there's a thing that he said that is just one of the coolest things ever. And it's where he goes like, yes, when God used someone in my life to show me that I was wrong about what living for him looked like, I had he says it this way, I had no choice but to live my life in service for him. And it's like, in that moment when you see like what God has done in your life, it's like, that should be the appropriate reaction. And that was. It's like, I have no choice. I don't have a choice. It's like, you do. You can choose, like, but it's like, there's zero logic in that. Like, and like when you see that, it's like, it's like there really is no choice, because there's no logic in not living my life for the one who has saved me despite all of my scum and villainy, like all of my spitting in his face, the way you said earlier. It's like, why would I do anything else? And I remember feeling that same way. And like, dude, hold on to that. I try as much as I can to remember that moment, sitting in my shack, just being like, talking to this person and being like, hey, I gotta go. Because as I'm talking to you right now, I'm realizing that they're like, yeah, I believe in God, but dude, he's been there the whole time and I didn't see it. And I need to tell him now that I see it and thank him for it. And they were like, okay. And I hang up, and then I just cried and like, God, thank you. And like, it's just cool. Like, it's cool to know that like God did basically the same thing for you. Like, I'm not special, and that's the coolest thing ever. Like, cause it's like another way that I'm like, dude, we're brothers in this. Like, it's great. Yeah. Oh, man.
Yeah. I think Jerry and I got very close, and I want you, Levi, to know also, it's like, I give you so much credit for pulling me up out of that as well. And we've had quite a few conversations just between the two of us when we were like the only ones at the house and stuff. But I text you directly for questions and stuff because I have just such an immense amount of respect and admiration for you. And I want you to know that like I love you, man. And I see all the work that you put into me also, like
God worked through me. Like it wasn't me. And I do want to let you know, I'm terrible at communicating. And
I do have to say though, and whenever I've had, like, I've sent you text messages that go unanswered for 3 weeks, but whenever I message about God or if I have a question, it's immediate in his response.
But I do want to let you know that when my mom died, and you lost your mother as well, when you had texted me things and were reaching out, though it was very encouraging to know that other people have gone through, and I know I was really bad with responding things, but
I know when you're in those situations, the "I'm so sorry, I'm here for you" can just make you so angry. And sometimes you just need to know that, hey, I understand what you're going through. I'm here to hear you.
But that it was very like it was good to hear.
Yeah.
And I know that I may not have expressed it at the time, but I thank you so much.
Of course, man.
Like, and I'm so sorry for the way that I've treated you, like, back a while ago.
Everything that's happened has led me to where I am now, and that is something that I wouldn't give up for anything.
Well, I think we went a little long. And that's good. But we've got another one to record. Ooh, pulling back the veil, the curtain greenness. And I don't want us to cut it short, but I feel like that's a good spot. Mm-hmm. We didn't ask you really any of the interview questions, and so sorry that you wasted your time picking some out. But pretty much a bunch of those things got hit, and for those listening, we might not need to say this or whatever, but Levi and I weren't like, hey, let's bring someone on that'll make us look good. Because not everything Jaret said made us look great. We backed off when we shouldn't have at times. And we talked about having you on at different times. But it was so clear to me, like in the last 2 weeks, I was like, I'm so glad that we didn't have you on the podcast earlier and we waited till now.
Seeing you at church and saying that you're wanting to be baptized is like, that's like,
this is when people need to hear from him.
Yeah, this is, yeah.
So thank you for being vulnerable. You've always been someone that I know you're willing to be vulnerable to a certain extent, depending on like the circle you're in too. But like, thank you for being willing to do that on here. Like, I hope that, I know that God will use that. There are people out there that need to hear it, but also it's a huge encouragement in our lives to see what God is doing in you. And I know it's going to be encouragement to others.
I hope that the person who needs to hear this hears it. And I will have myself out there. If you need to reach out or talk to me about anything, you can get my info from Jerry through the Discord.
Sure.
So
that's huge of you, man. Yeah. I love what I've loved hearing from you is how you know what God has done in your life. And you're like, all right, God, I'm stepping up to the plate. How are you going to, like, what do you want me to do now? You know, like that's not enough. A lot of people just like rest, and it's fine to rest and like, I've been saved. Like, I'm going to rest in God, like rest. And we're called to rest, but it's like, you're basically saying like, I've been saved. Like, all right, put me to work. And it's like, dude, that's incredible. Like that takes,
there's no other
guts.
option for it. All the work that was put into me.
There you go.
Through him. It's like, I need to learn the word and understand the Bible and the scripture and so that I can be more effective of that. But just because I don't know all that doesn't mean that I'm not going to be useful.
Oh, dude, that's so great. You know how many times I've felt the opposite? Like, I don't know the word well enough, so I'm just not even going to try. It's like, I'm so glad. I was like, oh, I got to get ready to tell him that. No, I don't. Like, there you are. You got it. Like, yeah, God can and will use you. And doesn't mean that we should just shirk our responsibility and not become more informed. But it does mean, like, you know, how often I hear people say, like, well, I don't know the word well enough, so I'm going to keep waiting. Did you keep waiting? Like the time I was like, all right, I'll respond to God and I'll try and do what I think he's calling me to do. Dude, I didn't know the word like well enough at all. I was constantly asking Levi or my grandpa or my dad, like these other people in my life, like, does this make sense? Does that make sense? Does this make sense? Like, what do I tell him here? What, you know, it's like, you know, just God calls you to something, respond and be used. You know, we've said that before, but like, do it. And I'm glad that to hear you say that. Before we go, I'll say it because Byron's not here. You're a guest. You have to tell us a joke.
All right.
He's a longtime listener. He's been.
I was there with the inception of the podcast.
Yes.
Do you know how to tell the gender of an ant?
I think I'm.
You put it in water.
Whoa.
If it sinks, it's girl ant. If it floats, boy ant.
Boy ant. I thought it was gonna. They're gonna be like, well, there's a U in the word, so she's a woman, like your aunt.
Yeah. I thought it might have gone that way. Yeah.
Boy ant.
Boy ant.
That's pretty good.
Boy ant.
You're a dad.
Yep.
I said something. I said something last night, and my wife and her sister were like, "Your dad is showing," because that was a dad joke. And I was like,
your dad is showing.
I was like, "Where? Where is he?" Dude, I love you.
I love you too, man.
I love you.
both of you so much.
We will have you back.
Yes.
Yeah.
Do you have anything to you want to plug before
Just go ahead and listen to Of Lore and Legend. I play Titus, and this D&D group is part of a huge part of where I am today. Played that first campaign for like 6 years, and you guys played it 2 or 3 years longer than that.
Dude, I never really realized, but like God used gaming to reach you. And I never realized that. Dude, like here I am so much of my life being like, I have to, like, I do. Yeah, I believe that God can use things like gaming. But like Jaret is like one of the biggest proof of concepts in my life.
That we're like, oh, how are we going to talk to these people? These people say that D&D is demonic, that it like is so against God.
Yeah, and it wasn't
Like,
super directly
It wasn't
what God
directly,
used.
but like
that's how
playing
God
that game
got you
is how we like
It got my foot in the door.
like
And that's exactly
in
what we're trying
a
to
group
do
that
in
cared
Christian
about you.
Influence. Yeah.
Dude, that's so cool. I didn't realize. So, you know, Christian Influence, we try and use gaming, things like D&D, things like video games, whatever it is. you know, and you're not even the biggest gamer, honestly.
No.
Like, because he plays sports video
He
games. So
plays
he's not a gamer.
Assassin's Creed and sports games.
Yeah, that's not a gamer. No offense, but you know, offense. No,
I'm playing college football. So.
but no, you know, if you play video games that are sports video games, you're a gamer. But no, like in a lot of ways, you're not the biggest gamer. Like you played video games with me from time to time, but I don't think you really play a whole lot of them anymore, right?
Nah,
it's like
just no time.
And even before then, but like, dude. Used a game to get you, and I never realized that. That's so. I've always been like, yeah, D&D was kind of how you got involved in our friend group, but like the whole point, about part of your testimony is like, we believe God used this friend group and to like give you something that you needed, and
we had even talked about like, oh, we want to just like show him Jesus, you know, like what if we have him in our friend group, like that, and like in the D&D group, like that was one of the reasons why we wanted you there.
So cool.
And it's like we never that's
all right. We got to end this. You're going to be back for sure. There's so much more I think that God can use out of what has happened in your life. And I'm so glad. It's been a privilege and honor to have known you, and it is to continue to know you. So man, all praise be to God. Like, I could just keep saying it, but we've said it a million times, but praise be to God, dude. Like, it's, and no offense, it's nothing you did. It's everything God did, right? And you know that, and I know you know that. But like, if there's people in your life that God has called you to be a friend to, do it and don't give up, man.
Do not give up.
Don't give up. And you know what? You may never have this moment, and I'm sorry, but even if you don't give up. And God uses it. And just be a loving friend to people, and get more people involved. I think I would have failed if I hadn't got Levi involved. And I didn't get him. God got you involved. But I mean, if I hadn't been like, dude, I can't do this alone.
I would have never reached out to Jaret, like, to be honest, if you hadn't talked about how you felt the Lord was.
I remember having that conversation where you were like, I don't mean to make you look bad.
No, I mean,
there was
looking
a lot
back,
of skepticism.
I feel like Peter, like,
oh, really?
Like at times, like when Jesus turns back to him and it's just like, get behind me, Satan. Like, I feel like that, like I was that person to you at times during those conversations, because I was very skeptical. Like, no offense.
Yeah. No, I remember multiple times where it's like, but Levi, I really think this is what God's calling me to. Like, do you trust me? Like, I don't know if I trust myself, but like, I need some help.
Yeah, I didn't trust you. I trusted what God. I trusted that you felt it was from God. Yeah, and that was what was the only reason why I had said yes to begin with. Like,
but
I'm so glad that God moved in such incredible ways and brought Jaret into all of our lives. And and in
so many ways, you are a lot of the glue that is now keeping this friendship group together, the D&D group. Like, you do a lot of work, whether I think you realize it or not, to like keep it together. And we need you. We do. So, all right, for those listening, we love you very much as well. And we hope you love Jaret. Let him know. Leave a comment down below if there's something you want to ask him, or like he said, he's willing to talk to you. And if you want to reach out to him and you feel like there's something that you can relate to in his story, you know, there's a powerful tool that every single believer has, and it is their testimony, and God uses it. And Jaret's got a powerful one. We all do. Whether you feel like, you know, oh, drugs weren't a part of my testimony, it's not powerful. It's not true. God uses your testimony in an incredible way. And if you want to talk to Jaret, reach out to me on the Discord. You can go to the discord.gg/Christian Influence. You'll see Mage up there at the top on the side. Reach out to me and I'll give you his information, his email, or whatever it is that he's okay with. And he's technically on Discord too, I think.
I think so. I need to figure out how Discord works.
There you go. Well, we happen to kind of be pros, so we can help you out.
You know, but we've been on there a couple times.
But no, honestly, like, and I'm only saying this because you already said it. Sometimes it feels like, you know, people go like, yeah, come talk to me. Like, I'll totally help. And it's like, nah, yeah, but I'm too scared. Don't be, dude. Reach out to him. Yep. Seriously. Or like, oh, but what if too many people reach out to him? Who cares? Let it, you know, he wants to be used by God.
Blow up his phone.
Maybe you're the person, maybe you can give Jaret right now the opportunity to be used by God in a way that he's asking to be used. Like, that's incredible, right? So, I mean, God did that with him. God used him to be like, hey, I was like, hey, God, I want to be used by you. And then I don't even think I really meant it at the time. But dude, God gave me what I asked for and gave me someone to be a friend to and to be my friend. And here we are. Like, this is such a cool thing. All right, I'm just
Rambling a little
Yep,
bit, but
I love to ramble. We love you very much.
roll the outro.
I gotta pee so bad.